There we go. It's official.
Oh, and then it looks like actually you have to give me sharing. I do have the button, but it says you've disabled
interesting.
participant.
That is, I'm just gonna make you host.
Okay.
Even though it kind of dropped me down, that's fine.
All right. So actually, before I get into this, I can see you all in my little panel here. How familiar are you all with Insight? Like, you know what it is? You don't know what it is?
Basically zero for me.
Sorry.
Okay. I heard different answers, but I heard a zero there. So that kind of answered my question. So I'm going to start with a little bit of just what it is and where we see it used. And then I'll dig into the use cases. And then I've got some resources on where to go next. So for a small group, definitely keep it interactive. Happy to answer questions. And if I don't know the answer, happy to chase them down and pass them through Mark as your community leader. So Insight, a little bit of history. We acquired Mindville about a year ago. So Mindville created really a database of anything, or I like to call it a repository of repositories, because while it is focused on asset and configuration management, you know, kind of the dirty word of CMDB, it's really more an XMDB, meaning that, again, anything that you want to capture and manage, you can do with Insight. And that means, you know, when you're looking at people assets, so like laptops and those kinds of things that will start to help you with your break fix. If you want to start managing the relationships between that, oh, my little build there got lost. Well, it's okay, we'll go on to the next. But really just any kinds of asset, it'll allow you to create those relationships between them, which is really where the power starts to come in. And from that screen, we gotta work on those builds, huh? The next one here. So Insight is, it comes with Jira Service Management Premium and Enterprise. So it's not an extra add-on or a plugin or anything like that. We took the time over this last year to make sure we incorporated into Jira, both JSM Cloud and Data Center. And what that allows you to do is start leveraging it with your services. And again, whatever you want to start to map in there. You see some examples here. Again, a lot of the examples would be around IT, but you see down at the bottom, right, it is powered by the platform, which means that you can start to use automation against whatever those assets are. And in the examples I will show you, there's a lot of automation behind the cover, so I will make sure I call those out. In terms of just how Insight is set up, so the first part is the schemas. Think of that as the grouping, right? That's kind of the big bucket. So if you want to target, we'll take IT, you know, employee assets as kind of the schema. There might be different object types in there, which could be monitors and laptops and tablets and phones and things like that. The objects themselves are going to be the instances of that object type. And then attributes are just that, right? They're going to be, think of it as like metadata against those objects. Now, as part of those objects, they can also reference other objects, and that's where you get those relationships that I had you go through twice in that build slide. I do want to call out that it is not just for IT assets. I think I've said that a few times already, but I can't really stress it enough. So it's not just for those kinds of traditional use cases, but we have people managing people in there, right? So your employees, what skills they have, what entitlements they have. We have customers or account management kind of things that are tracked in there, or badges. From a facilities perspective, right? Just HVAC systems and AC units and TVs and things like that, where people are auditing, you know, different rooms as I'm going through. And then not just those kinds of physical things or even logical things. It can also be used to store workflow and practices. So what I mean by that is, if you think of like a matrix of information, right? So since we're JSM people, you're probably familiar with like a priority matrix, right? Impact times urgency equals priority. There's a lot of standardization there with people who follow the ITIL framework, but you might have tweaks to that. What Insight allows you to do is actually kind of create your own matrices. So you can have stuff for risk levels, and I'll show you an example of that. You can use it to hold approver groups, or if this happens, then kick off these tasks, right? It can actually hold the task that needs to be kicked off. I'll show you an example of lead times where it actually goes and checks, against this issue. Let me go look it up in this table to see that I have the proper lead time. And then you can see that end catch-all there. Right? We've got people who are storing all kinds of interesting things. The gurneys in the hospital is one of my favorites. I've actually got a customer that I'm talking to next week that wants to do microscopes. So they're really super expensive microscopes that they have to go and do like field services for at different client sites. And there's all kinds of information about that. So they're going to start tracking all of that information. I see some chat questions that I can't access. There we go.
The version of DC you need to access. Is that is it the same as cloud where you need a premium license?
Oh, yes. Yeah, so it's not in the base, correct. And then I think it's like the last 2 releases. And if you're on older version of Data Center, you can get the app add-on. Okay. All right, so for the use case, I'm gonna go through a handful of things here. I'm gonna start with that traditional support since everybody's kind of familiar with those use cases. I'll show you how Insight can start to enrich the information and provide more context to the users. Facilities, so I mentioned the HVAC systems. So we'll take a look at how you can use Insight to drive dynamic, kind of like cascading fields. HR is always a good one because it touches across lots of different teams. So in this case, I will actually show how that HR will even create a new object. So heads up, I'll need a volunteer. But we'll create a new object and then it'll actually kick off and push that Insight information over to the IT support team. So really like a full collaboration example there. Intake, so a lot of people use JSW, right? Like Jira Core, so people are using their projects there. They get a lot of asks, right? Engineering teams get a lot of asks to do things. You don't want all of that clogging up your backlog. So we see a lot of people using Jira Service Management as an intake portal where people can put in their ideas, they can kind of get triaged, if you will, and then once they're accepted, actually do flow through to the right Jira software team. And then the last one is the example where we are going to see the workflow. So my example is going to be from a change management practice or change enablement, where really we're going to show how based on some questions, it's going to drive a risk score. So I'll show you how that all looks in the back end. And again, feel free to ask questions. All right. So you should see my portal view. Okay. So I'm logged in here as Cassie as my first one. And the reason I wanted to log in as Cassie first was if you think of your traditional help, support kind of workplace support issues, people are going to come in and ask for new things, or people are complaining about the things they've got. I don't know if you all have Macs, but all of us keep hitting the postpone button on those upgrades. A lot of my colleagues are experiencing some issues with that latest Mac upgrade. They might want to come in to the portal request. And what's great is you can start to use the information in Insight to narrow down their selections. So because I'm logged in here as Cassie, when she goes to log an issue about her assets, I can actually filter down this list to only show the assets associated with CATHI. So from an end user perspective, just being able to not make them have to go look under their laptop and find that asset tag. The likelihood of them actually giving you useful information right from the start can be very powerful, right? So we can say the upgrade my system. It's super slow now. So that'll go through. Looks like I'm missing a value there. Anyway, the part that we were looking at was that asset. Let's go back to Alana. Actually, I guess we haven't seen Alana yet. So I usually demo off of Alana because she's got all powers. Which you can see I need to work on my CATHI skills there. But from the same perspective, right? So if we come back into that help center, we looked at that simple support use case. Here in operations, if it's not a laptop, maybe you guys are doing more more operations kind of things, right? Here I've got very similar to what we had before, where I can have Alana say that the performance is spotty, errors popping up on screen. Now, this example is actually using this affected services field with Insight. So if y'all are already using the affected services field, you know that it's not extensible, right? You can't actually add any attributes to it. What we've done is create a application schema that allows you to start connecting to that service schema, which means that really you can extend it, right? So what I mean by that is this is the ticket that we just logged, right? Performance is spotty against that billing affected service. So we can see that information. We could certainly pop up the graph and start to see kind of everything that's related there. You could start to, see information about that, these applications that support that billing service. But instead of making people click on that, I'm actually surfaced up those applications over here on the right-hand side. So I'm using automation to go look up those relationships and then add it to the issue itself. So in really providing extra context for your agents to be able to have this information at hand. This is a really simple example, right? It's just kind of one hop, but you can actually hop through those many different relationships to surface up any pertinent information here. So super simple examples on the support side. Let's take a look at some facilities examples. So this one's not so much, I'm not going to get bogged down into what facilities does or their workflow, but really what I want to highlight here is I've got a form for facilities, and kind of one of the things that you would ask would be, where's the issue located? And so what I've got in Insight is a structure where I've got different regions, and then based on the region I select, this next option is going to filter down for that, right? So it's a mirror, so I can see the offices I have in the Americas. If I had picked APAC, then now you can see my different options here. So being able to start to cascade down. Now, in my case, I actually go to a mayor. We pick the Baltimore office. I continue to traverse down. Now, do you have to step through? No. You can certainly have like a mayor and then have all of the floors or all of the offices. It's really just how you want to set up those different fields. But a good example of just being able to use Insight to start to cascade those fields. Okay, any questions so far?
I have one.
Sure.
Those fields, those are values stored in Insight. Are they still searchable from JQL, for example? Do they function the exact same way? Can we still query for those values in, say, JQL?
You'd use IQL, but you can embed IQL in the JQL.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep. All right, so HR example. This is where I need a volunteer. So I actually need two, because I'm gonna just need two people come off mute and say, okay. To pick people.
You can have me.
Okay. I got Peter Dave. All right, well, nobody else is. Well, here, we'll just make you first and last name from your first name. So what I'm going to do here is basically why I like to pick a volunteer is so that it's not pre-staged, right? So letting you all choose the options there. I'm going to pretend that Peter Dave is going to join Atlassian here. We'll put him in a mayor. Mentioned earlier, I'm in Baltimore, so you can come join me. And then actually, anybody want to, or I guess Peter Dave, since you came off, I'll let you choose what org you want to be a part of.
Oh,
or team.
I don't know. Let's go solutions engineering.
Okay. All right. So just like we saw in facilities, based on what he selected in that department, this is going to filter down to the roles for that department. I'm a specialist, so I'm gonna have you join my team. I'm gonna leave that blank. You can see, some of these are required, some are not. I mentioned Alana is my fake user here, all powerful, so we'll let you report into her. And then actually, I just skipped over that. There was a field there that said employee equipment needed, yes or no. That's important because I said yes, standard for the role. And what that means is this is going to help drive the ticket over for IT support. So if you think about this example, right, HR might have a whole nother process. We're certainly just targeting into one little piece, but this would be, hey, somebody's accepted the offer. We need to now start getting them into the system and getting all of their equipment sorted. So this is illustrating that the HR person can come in, fill that out, right? Very easy to use portal. And then this is what it looks like in the back end. These are all the selections that we did. Now, I guess I didn't point this out. When you put your insight fields on screen, I kind of showed this earlier. There's a little caret there. You can actually choose what you're surfacing up here. If you want to see all the details, you can pop that open just like we saw earlier. But the fact that you can also choose like what metadata is shown for each of these, that's completely configurable as well when you're building those fields. Anyway, so this is what we filled out. But over here on the right, I now have new objects. So we've created this Peter Dave object in my people schema. We put him in that solution engineering department, gave him that specialist role, mapped him to Alana as his manager. And then over here on the right, now granted, HR people don't care about this. I have it surfaced up here because it's a demo system. But what I'm showing is that, we've got a suggested laptop. Where did that come from? Well, I've actually associated different models of laptops with different target roles. So that's why that got suggested. And then these subscriptions are based on that specialist role. So you can see I've got different access policies that are tied to my different roles. Again, HR probably doesn't care about this, but that's why I've automatically raised and linked a ticket for IT support. I've also raised one up for facilities. So because I selected that Baltimore office, we're going to send that over. And if you notice, there's even different workflow for those. Let's take a look at the IT support ticket. So just like we saw before, right, we're surfacing up that information. So now IT support has that new object, has the model that they need to go out and procure, has the information on the software that they need to set him up with, right? So they could carry out their work. And just an example of being able to drive a lot of that data where people were probably looking up in other systems and bringing it all together in one. Okay. All right, so the next one is going to be engineering. And actually, before I go into that, let's show you a little behind the scenes. So let me look at Insight. So here's Insight, and you can see I've got a few different schemas. Again, repository of repositories, so you can have as many schemas as you need. In cloud, we do support up to 1 million objects. So, you know, kind of as you're building these out, keep that in mind. You can support much more than that on-prem, but of course, you know, your compute power would have to match those specs. I will say, and I think I've got a slide for this if we get back, when you're thinking about, does it become a schema or do I kind of put it all in one schema? It really depends on your use case. Kind of a good rule of thumb is if you are bringing in data from other systems, it's probably best to map it into one schema. So if you've got like SCCM data or Active Directory data, that can all go into their own sources. And the advantage there is you don't have to manipulate it any. And then what you do is you create your own schema that's kind of picks and chooses from those various schemas. So you're kind of building on the fly. It gives you lots of flexibility and also allows other teams to start to leverage that. I was going to say raw data, but like the inputted data, because people use data in different ways. And this gives you that flexibility so that it really helps support, you know, your team's particular use case. All right, so let's go look at the engineering, which is the next one. So this is the intake example that I mentioned. I've just got a handful of different teams here for my engineering. So as an example, I've got a data science team here. I've got a security team here. And if you notice, I've associated a project key as well as an issue type with both of them. The reason I call that out is because that's what I'm using with automation to actually direct those into their backlog. So what I mean by that is if we go back, so here's a get engineering support request. Here are those groups. And just like before, right, if I select like global security, here are the teams under global security. So I can pick one of those. And then I've actually have different offerings. So I've created essentially a service catalog through Insight. And this is all coming from what we were just looking at, right? So I've got these different teams. The hierarchy, I've actually kind of kept my teams flat. And so I've got parent teams, and that's how it kind of hops back to each other. And then I've got this other object type called service offering. So that's the third field that we were selecting. And how it knows which one to associate it with is that responsible team. So I essentially have links back to these objects. Make sense? Yeah. Okay. So that means when you start to, I don't know, please contest. Oops, my knowledge getting in there. Go ahead and submit that. So now I've got this engineering kind of intake ticket. And then what you can do is, again, for demo purposes, I automatically launch it over there. What we've been seeing a lot of people do though is actually use a workflow to assess it before it gets into the backlog, right? Because then you're kind of helping with that cleanup aspect, right, for those teams. So if we come over here to the JSW project, right? Oh, sorry, this is actually for the SecOps team. They're going to have that information. Actually, we should actually go to, let's pick a Jira software team. So maybe if we did, yeah. So here is an example. If it went to the mobile team, that's actually a Jira software team. but really just using Insight to start to direct that. I'll give you another example before we get into the change. And maybe this one will resonate a little bit more. So with that engineering group that I was talking about, right? If you think of support, in this example, I'm kind of coming at it from an account management perspective, right? You've got different customers that you might support that work for different companies. So we'll pick Brenda there. Which product does this bug impact? It's actually surfacing up products that are associated with the company that she works for. Here, before we do that, let's actually show you some of this. So very similar to what we were just seeing on the engineering side. Here I've got Brenda, right? So Brenda works for this Campbell Lake company. I've got company information. So here's Campbell Lake, and you can see that they're licensed for those products, right? So I didn't have to have that information against Brenda, but that still came up when I selected her. So just another example of using that relationships to start to drive that information. So we can say we've got showing on screen. And we'll say, I think this is a bug. So now me as the account manager for Brenda, I've logged this through. It was only surfacing up things that she was, licensed for. So I'm not chasing down bugs that her company shouldn't even be looking at. I would get this into my project. I could start doing my investigation, right? Basically going through your typical process. And then from a, hey, you know what? I've actually now acknowledged that this is a bug, right? So we'll say, yes, this is a bug. We will share with our team. So we'll let Brenda know that we're working on it. And then what I've got is automation in the back end that is using that same lookup, so it knows which project to push it to. So in this case, it is actually a bug in the Platinum Jira software team. So you can see this is a software project. Here is the bug. And then if we look at it from their backlog, it should end up there at the bottom. And then they can certainly bring it up into their active sprint after they, do whatever triage or anything that they need to do. You can see my poor Platinum team's getting inundated with stuff. But we can drop that in, and then it would certainly show up in one of their boards. So you can see it there. So from a user perspective, from an admin perspective, the fact that I didn't have to know like which team, which software project this particular product needed to end up in, all of that is just taken care of for me with Insight.
I just have a very small point of curiosity. I know that there's an attribute type that allows to link projects, but I saw where it looked like all you had there was a project key as a text field. Is there a specific reason for that?
Because what you are talking about is available in data center only.
Okay, yeah, because I've only got experience with the on-premise. We're still on server, but we bought the app just as it was getting bought by Atlassian. So
yeah, there's still a handful of things that are available in data center that have not made its way into cloud, which I am anxiously waiting for. And that is one of them.
That is one of them. Okay.
Yes. All right, so my last kind of big one is on that workflow, kind of to the practices side. So I use change as my example here because when you look at change enablement, there's kind of so many paths it can go down. And there's kind of two that stand out. So if you think of standard changes, right, these are pre-approved changes. They don't have to go through another approval. You should have, right, if you're doing your practices, I guess from a good practice perspective, you have had already some, like somebody or a group has already blessed this, right? They've already said, yeah, here's the standard procedure, here's exactly what's going to happen, here's what's required. So there's no reason to ask your team to keep keying that in, right? So what I've actually surfaced up is, so this is that standard change. In my case, I'm just doing some simple kind of app maintenance things. You notice I've got a bunch of different applications here. And now based on what I select, it's going to filter down to the changes that are applicable to that application. So in my case, I've got a handful here. I can select one. I can put in a start date. So we like weekend starts. We'll say it's not going to take that long. And now from the person raising the change, very simple, right? Hey, I'm just going to do this simple task. I need to log it because we need that awareness, but we're not going to bog them down with adding a bunch of content. Now, if we look at that change, notice I do actually have a lot of that information here. So I can see that this is a standard pre-approved change for what we selected and who it was approved by. We've got an implementation plan, a backout plan. You notice that there is some automatic subtasks created, and then it even skipped ahead from a workflow perspective. So all of that is being driven by Insight. You see some pro forma there. I don't know if you all are using forms. Also this, so I've also got a lead time, right? Your start date is less than the 7 days required for this change risk level, which is low. So a couple of things happened there was it looked up all of that information about that change. It looked at the dates that I selected and mapped it against that lead time. And then it also created these tasks. So if we peek at what all of that looked like in Insight, so this is my practice schema where I've got a handful of different things. The one we're looking at are standard changes. So here you can see the different standard changes I have. And so let's look at the one I selected. Was it this one? This one. So here you can see this is the application that was applicable to. You can see the content that I had here. And then notice I had tasks associated. So I even linked different tasks. So if I selected something else, did I use the same task for everything? I kind of did, didn't I? That's not exciting. There we go. There's some with different tasks. But the fact that you can start to use this to drive what's happening, to drive those different pieces. The other part there, right? So it was not only filling in this information, creating those tasks, but I also had lead time. So lead time was based on the priority. And so it actually went and looked up the number of days, and then I had the automation calculate that and put up the warning. So using this to drive that information. Now my next, oh, somebody go off? Nope. My next example is going to be for normal changes. Now normal changes aren't pre-approved. You're going to have to ask them a handful of questions or look up other data. So in my case, I kind of do a little bit of both. I've got a couple questions that I'm going to ask, which you can see here on the left. You can see the objects I've got for those questions are the answers. Notice each answer has a score there. I can certainly add additional answers. So by that, I mean, we can create one and we'll say, I don't know, maybe, and we can give it a 3. And we'll say maybe for the event. So now I've got another option there and a couple different questions. So what does that actually look like from this side? So here's my normal change request. We can put that in. So we need to upgrade the CRM. We can have an answer. And then this is where I can start to put in those services. Again, you saw earlier, you don't actually have to put in the application. We can certainly look that up. I think in most cases, people know the application probably more so than the service. You can have different questions there. We've got my dates there that we can put in. And then here's where I was just showing you. So these are the questions, right? Will the change be completed during business hours? You can see it services up that little icon as well as the information there. So we'll say, of course, it's being done. And then look, here's that new answer I put in, right? So I didn't have to go into the fields. I didn't have to, mess around with anything else. I could just control that from the insight objects, and that appears there for me. Has tested been completed? Of course not. We want to create those tasks. And so now what's happening in the background is once that gets submitted, it's going to go and look up all of those values that we have in insight against that. It's going to, actually, I can show you what it's going to do. It's going to then compare the score based on the lower and upper limit and decide what the risk level is. So it's actually looking at all of these different questions and their scores. I even use a service risk, right? So depending on that service tier, I associate another point value with that. And if we look at the change, we'll see that the priority, the risk is filled in. We've got a nice chart there, but then we've also added a comment here that shows your risk score is 18. The person in the portal would also see that, by the way. So when they're looking at this, I did surface that up as a end user comment so they could see that, and then also giving them access to that risk assessment, just explaining how we came up with that number so that they could understand. So with that change, just being able to drive that risk score and then start to trigger additional, workflows, additional tasks and things like that. Any questions on that? Okay. All right. So from a use case, that's what I had. I kind of alluded to this earlier, right? I know I showed a lot. I know I speak really fast. So hopefully a lot of that didn't get lost. But when you're looking at the use cases, the best idea to get started is really just understand what value you're trying to do, right? Because there is a lot of cool stuff that you can do, but there's no sense going down that path if it actually isn't providing information to that use case, right? If it doesn't help add context to resolve faster, if it doesn't help add context to avoid somebody looking up in another system, then it's not really worth going down that path. This is really where a lot of people have struggled with CMDBs in traditional tools, is that there's so much information out there that you want to capture it all. So our kind of guidance on that is start small, right? Start with that use case, understand what the person needs, and then start to go figure out, okay, where's this data? Where can I get it from? Do I need to manipulate it in any way? And that'll start to help you understand how to model the data. So creating that structure. And then once you put it in place, iterate, right? We're all about starting small and doing continuous improvement. So as you grow, that's also a really nice aspect of insight, is that you don't have to get it perfect, right? The schemas that I showed you, you saw they're pretty small from an object perspective, right? It is a demo system, but the fact that I didn't start with all of that, right? I started with one use case, and then somebody's like, oh, wouldn't it be great if you could do this? And like, sure, that might require another object type, or that might require an additional attribute. But it was all driven by those use cases. And then I promised some resources. So we do have a bunch of links and information that you can access. Team is coming up in 2 weeks. I don't know if any of y'all will be on site in Vegas there. If not, they are doing a virtual team event the week after. I will say there is on-site insight training in Vegas if you can make it. So some of the original Mindful folks, so from EFICode, are going to be doing like a advanced insight training. So if you can get there, definitely a good course to take. Also doing presentations, throughout the days there, several of them focusing on insight as well. This getting started guide is one of my favorites. It actually walks through a lot of these use cases and kind of starts with, again, some kind of simple examples. And then there's a lot of little videos that Charlotte takes you through. So really easy to follow, and it's kind of a good starting point. And then there's, of course, some white papers, and we do have a university class that also gets into insight. And I think I covered that, but yeah, the flexibility is key. I like this graphic on the right. I don't get paralyzed by analyzing all the different options. Start small, start with that specific problem in mind, and really aim to be accurate enough, right? It's being able to surface up that information and kind of making a start is better than not having anything. And if you really strive for that 100% perfect, you're not going to get there, right? And referencing a lot of those failed CMDB implementations of the past. All right.
I didn't realize I'm completely blacked out here. This is Dean Saris commenting. I just want to say I'm blown away by the presentation. This is this is a revolution to me. I only had limited exposure to it, and my understanding was this was simply a database where you could store, just IT objects, right? And they just kind of have that tied to it. I even tried to do this like myself using Jira 10 years ago, and it was ridiculous, right? I actually had issues represent the objects themselves, and then tried to link those issues to issues, etc. And it's nice to actually have a full functioning database, but I didn't realize it was this ingrained. I didn't realize you could build automations. I had no idea that you could actually build objects for people. And from what I understand in your presentation, can the people objects also be linked to user accounts? I'm not sure, but that just opens a whole realm of possibilities right there.
Yeah, and that's what I use for approvals, right? So the people objects kind of are more enriched, and then you've got that user attribute for them.
That's outstanding. One of my dreams that I've been trying to do for years is assign people to, say, like a position, for example, and then I have that position assigned on issues, right? Rather than having to define it by a user account. This has been a huge need of mine for years. And now to be able to kind of to configure that in Insight in some way is gonna, oh my God, it's gonna really change the way I work, or the way we work. I have so many questions, but I think I'll probably start by rewatching this demonstration video and going through that documentation that you included. And I'll see what I can do about getting to Vegas. But so far, this is opening my eyes to a lot of possibilities.
Awesome, I appreciate that. And yeah, Insight's one of my favorite, like, just to your point, right? So many possibilities. And in your exact use case, I have support groups as a custom Insight field. And so I do exactly that. I have teams I have groups associated with my different applications. And so I I don't assign it to them, right? Because we do only have that single assignment, but I use that as my, to drive my queues and have it essentially assigned to teams.
I love that. Oh my gosh, where do I begin here? Another thing I noticed, right, with the way you work, I noticed you have certain buttons for escalating issues and so on. I would love any kind of demo of the way your team works, right? And can just see that workflow to see how you guys use the escalate button, what that means, and how that is configured into Insight. I guess up here, let me ask a more specific question. Rather than making your traditional Jira field for a drop-down list of selectable options, do you recommend just kind of making those select lists in Insight instead? I feel like you can do a whole lot more, and I don't really see the point of using Jira otherwise.
So it depends. So we're still building out on some of the Insight. So for example, I mentioned forms, right? Performa. Currently, Performa does not work with Insight. That is coming. So you'd want to use Jira Fields for that. And some things, don't overcomplicate, right? Like if it's just yes, no, that's fine. So it really depends. I know that's a very consultant answer, but I think where I don't need to use it, I just use Jira Fields or I use the Performa fields. But if I know that I want more metadata against it, then yeah, I go to Insight.
Understood.
And it kind of goes to that comment I made of like iterate. So sometimes I start with the, just regular Jira fields, and that's fine for my initial use case. And then as I go on more, I'm like, oh, actually that should be an Insight field. And I've actually had to go the other way too. I had one field that I was like, oh, this one's going to be super powerful. Let's put that in Insight. And then it just made the graph messy. It was like, I'm not even doing anything with it. Like that can just be a very simple field. So
I see. And I noticed there were dependencies, right? There were dependencies as well, depending on what you select with one field, how you relate that object to others determines the selectable options in other fields if you include it on the same form. That's awesome. That's
the real power. That
yeah.
the cascading capability is huge.
Yeah.
Is there permissioning in Insight also?
Yes.
Yeah, so you've got permissions on the schemas themselves as well as at the object type level.
Yeah, that's one great advantage over select field in Jira is that you can have a list that is maintainable by a small subset of users that don't have admin permission to maintain your custom fields.
The other thing is you could have one field, right? So I don't know, we'll just go with item, right? And based on attributes, right, depending on who that person is, they only see a select, right? Like, so you can start to have just one big group, list of things, but then based on other categories or factors, right? Like they only see the subsets. So just from an admin perspective, it just cleans a lot up, right? I don't need 10 fields for the same thing, but subsets of that same data.
May I ask, from just general feedback of people who've gotten that far, is it easy enough to let non-admin users go and adjust fields in a selectable dropdown from Insight?
So we've got different teams because of those permissions where they can only access like their, one, they can only see their schema, and then they can only edit like their object. You see a lot of people who kind of give that service catalog aspect, right? Like, hey, here, you can update that as much as you want, right? Those options that you have people select. So I wouldn't say it's like on a ton of things, but certainly a narrow scope like that where, you don't need me as an admin to come and do that for you.
I have a client right now that I'm working with where it's going to be a model where they have this need to manage. They can select like a group of projects, and their customer is the one who actually selects the projects, and they have to select based upon what's available to them. So basically going to give the internal team access to that object type so that they can add projects and associate them with the client, so that the client sees what they're supposed to see on the front end.
I see.
I've actually even seen that where we had another kind of going back to the support groups field where they used it on the portal. So you could go in the portal, kind of like how I had Peter Dave, right? Like I created that object. They basically were signing themselves up and like kind of adding their own things through the portal. So they didn't have the Insight access,
good-
but
Yeah,
essentially
and the
it was like
request
a
type.
pass through. Mhm.
Yeah, they can have like a request type where they're just putting a request for, they type in whatever the project name is and they already have the client picker, and then yeah, hit submit and
Exactly.
it automatically creates the record. Yeah, that's actually a good
That
way
was
to
the
do
thing,
it.
it was automatic, and then they had a record of it too. So
Yeah.
it was kind of like that safety. Because I will say, I've unfortunately had teammates who click the delete button. It looks like you're deleting just your object, or like the actual
Alt
instance.
delete button.
Yes, and they'll delete like the whole object type. So
I like that. I like that a lot.
Is there any sort of object level security coming in the future roadmap so that you could grant a person access to just one object and not all the others that might be able to create it, and like a bit like how issue security works, issue security schemes work on issues?
I'm not aware. I know like in general that they are looking at security, but I'm not sure the specifics of that. Other than like fronting it, kind of with that request type that we just talked about. Yeah.
The downside I see with having everything working through request type is if you want to manage many different objects, and then you start to add all the different kinds of attributes, and you end up with a whole bunch of additional custom fields just to be able to pass that through.
That's fair. Yeah.
From request. And in a big enterprise area where we're trying to keep our number of custom fields manageable, we love Insight for that, but then trying to build that
the object list. So
yeah.
I do know we are working on an update through URL. So in theory, right, like people could have spreadsheets that they manage. Everybody loves their spreadsheets. And you could point them at like, hey, just drop your update here, and then you ingest it that way.
We do that with Google Sheets. We just publish them to CSV and have the import. I do that on an ad hoc basis.
Okay.
You mean you're going to parameterize the URL? That's on the roadmap, so you can actually go straight to have a link straight to an object or something? Well, you can. You have a link straight to an object now, but if you wanted to have a link straight to a filtered view, kind of like how you do with Jira.
You do that with the search, at least on the on-premise version. I don't know if
cloud is still
search.
It's all kind of blocked. It's got global search, but if you wanted to have there's times where I need to have it kind of for admin purposes to be able to link straight to a filtered view of an object. You can't. You have to. It'll always bring up like whatever your last search was. It remembers that, and then you have to redo your search.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, I think we're 100% rolled out to the new Insight landing screen. So you see the new search.
I saw that. Yeah.
So that like right now doesn't support IQL, which data center does, which is fantastic. So you'll see a lot of those data center features start to move over into cloud. So.
And yeah, just one of my pet peeves that Insight has solved for me is over the years, I would always get frustrated because I needed more project metadata and being able to have ways of working with, hey, a project has, these attributes. So one of the things that I actually do is I've created where you have an automation rule. It can be triggered by create project or project created. So every time a project's created, it goes and dumps things into a project object. And I saw that you had yours, Kathy, but it'll dump. I have it capture the project name, the key, what's the type of project, and the ID, which is a pain in the butt to get if you don't use something like that. That simple little automation, you have to actually go into like the hover over to see the URL of the to get the ID. And that's one of those things that's kind of key. Like one of my use cases was my current client has they have a lot of handoffs. they get a ticket, comes in, it's like, well, I need legal to see this, I need compliance to see this, I need to send this to tier 3. Oh, and I need this to go off to software, but only tier 3 is allowed to send it to software. So I really built out this this object type for project where and then I have my automation on it where it'll the user basically selects from an inside field, they'll select where they want to send it, and then based upon the metadata I've captured in the project, which includes like the issue type or things like some of the things that Kathy's shown here, it'll automatically spawn a ticket to that group and link it right there on the spot, so that and that's where it's like independent of whether it be in JSM or software, I can actually do that. And then and your picker list will be dependent upon what values I have. I have a whole bunch of flags in my my object. Actually, I have populated one here that I can show. Give me one moment. I can share my screen. I promise I'll be brief. Oh, I need to reclaim. I'll figure out why I can only do host and not make presenter, but I'll.
Dale and Lucas, while he's pulling that up, you guys were quiet. Any thoughts for you guys?
No, this is all new to me. I actually don't use service management. I work on a software development team. So this is just a completely different side of Jira that I've never been exposed to. So I am being a sponge, and there aren't questions I know to ask at this moment. So I've been absorbing as much as I can.
Just to back up Lucas there, I have the same background, so don't feel bad.
Okay, fair enough. I'm a novice.
So from that side,
sorry, go ahead, Kathy.
No, go ahead, please.
Well, Dean and I actually, so one of the questions that we had was migration. So the latest that I saw out in the community was some tips on how to migrate from server to cloud for the insight data that you might have. Is there any new information on that? No, okay.
Well, I imagine you'd have to either do it through an API or the painful 1,000 at a time if you have more than 1,000 records into the CSV and then load it into your schema.
Yeah, I will say there are partners that are looking at kind of productizing things for that. Actually, I'm working with one that's more from cloud to cloud. So they're building an app for that using Forge. And so I know also several other of our, I don't know if they're productizing it, but I know they're building stuff. So when they have implementations, they're leveraging their tools. Like, I don't know if they'll end up in the marketplace though.
Okay, thank you.
There is a way to
sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I guess all right. So I guess in the end, there is a way to import objects based from a CSV at least, right? I mean, something like that at least, right? If we had some sort of, I don't know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. CSV, where am I blanking? Do you have JSON there? There's external imports.
That's right. You got to go to the object schema and configure, and then you have an import place where you can do the import. You can import by CSV or JSON.
And then there's an external one, and then soon, I shouldn't say soon, hopefully soon, we will start getting connectors like they have in data center.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the connectors. It's a little, right now we're actually building things custom because there's just no way to do it otherwise.
Before you go on, Mark, just a question for Lucas and Dale. So the engineering intake, do you think your teams would use something like that? Or do you all like struggle with the backlog grooming, or not really?
Maybe. I would say, yeah, I mean, from a backlog grooming standpoint, I think we do okay, but yeah, I would say it's probably maybe right now, but I could definitely be sold on it for sure.
I think it depends on the maturity of the the product. If you're in you've got a product that's already, it's released and it's you're not in a build stage,
Mhm.
then I think Insight becomes much more powerful because you've got to maintain it. You're going to have people coming in with requests, and that's where like what you were showing, Kathy. I was thinking like a previous life where I would have loved something like that because we had all these communication gaps. So the users didn't know who to request the help from. It was like, do I go straight to the development team? I have coffee with this developer. Maybe I'll hit them up and they'll put it in the backlog. Or you have the IT team going, wait, we delivered something. Where am I supposed to put this? So if you have it where it's just like all captured in Insight and it's just like another attribute, then yeah, your service, you can have it where an end user just says, I have a problem with this software, and it goes, okay, I'll automatically create a new bug on
Yeah.
project X, and it gets incorporated into your triage.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think so. I'm primarily the Scrum Master on our team, and our product owner is the one who really interfaces with the customer base that all the requirements are being generated from. I think that the challenge that we've had sometimes is the application that we build and maintain is very downstream. We rely on several other databases. We pass data to another application. So a lot of times we'll have our product owner come and say, hey, there's a bug that we need to log, but it turns out it's a user error, or it's perhaps an issue with another downstream application that the payload's being sent to. So I could see it being useful. I think it's just a matter of almost like triaging and having us look into it before we actually say, okay, it is a bug or it is an incident of production or something like that. But I could certainly see the case being made for sure.
So
Thanks for the feedback.
So real quick, I'll just kind of showcase some of the things I've been doing with Insight, and thank you again, Kathy, for letting me have a demo environment to play around with. As you see here, I've got like all the projects that are in this instance captured, and like I was talking about, I've got the name, the key, the ID, request type, and then I also have all the issue types captured with their metadata. If that comes up. Interesting, there it goes. I'm just, for some reason, going a little pokey at the moment. But yeah, very simple one where it's got the issue type and then the issue type ID. And the issue type ID is important for the automation I've got going. So let's say right here, I'm gonna, do I even have a, maybe I should use a different example because I don't know that I've even set up a request type on this one yet. No, that's just a queue. I don't have a raise request option there, so I don't have a request type available. Let me try a different one here. In fact, I might have something in my backlog already. I do. So if I go and just open this up, just so you got the ticket view. I've been playing around with it, but over here I have this spawn issue, and then basically what this is similar to what I set up for the client. It's looking to that Insight database to tell me these are the 4 areas that I can spawn to, and I can say, all right, this is a software project. Let's spawn it over to service management, and then after a few seconds, I'll see the new item come in.
So that's cool. So it's basically like where you were letting them choose like a category, if you will, and then based on that category, it goes to the right team. That's cool.
Yeah, this is
cool.
Because they have a need. Like this is a team that has a. Here we go. I had to refresh, and then when it's done, it clears it back out. But they had a need for being able to send things back and forth. Their old system was one where kept the same ticket and they just kept handing it off from team to team. Like, oh, that's going to be terrible. And Jira, you can't do that. It's not, and Jira doesn't have APIs for being able to move something from one project to another by design. So this was a way that I was able to enable that. And like I said, you're only seeing, if I go back and I add this, you're only seeing the 4, and that's because of what I've set up in the this field's IQL, the filter. And then if you want to see real quick, I have like, here's what it's doing when it spawns. It says when the value changes for that spawn issue, then, and it's not empty, goes in here, and then it runs a clone activity. And this where it'll copy whatever I want over, and you can see where I'm using smart values. And then it'll also, if there's already linked issues, it'll go in, it'll also add relates to the what was just created, so that everything, if you've got like grandchildren and siblings, they all get this related activity where they can see what's going on. And then of course at the end it clears it out. That's just a quick automation. And then like I said, there's the and then the one that I have that populates every time somebody adds a new project, very quick. It'll populate all this stuff. I like this as well because you have to go to different places in Jira to get to the project settings page, the home page of it. I can just go straight to this insight page to get all of the, it's kind of like a dashboard for an admin to see anything they need about the project. I even have it like, oh,
this
go
is
ahead, Kathy.
fantastic. No, this is a fantastic example from like an admin perspective, because I definitely have very large customers who have, that sprawl of projects and people spinning things up, and to be able to capture that right from the start. That's really
My
cool.
one wish is that they had a smart value that you can capture for whether it's a company managed or team managed project. But yeah, there's that. I also have used this to capture like JSON. So like if I want to know who are all the service desk team members on a project without clicking into people, I can go to that JSON and then I copy paste that into a quick JSON converter screen. I can quickly see the team members. Just the way that one way as an admin, I can get all kinds of cool info. I briefly brought up the other use case that I can't show, unfortunately, because I didn't replicate it here in the demo environment, but where you have a need for a client needs to be able to select a project that is, it's actually a customer that needs to select a project, and that project is associated with their org, which is kind of complicated because you have to be able to have like a table that's got all your customer data, like their Jira ID, and then another object type that's got their, all your organizations. You have to have and then you have the other object type with your projects. And I actually had to this is the only time I've had to reach out to support on Insight. IQL can get very complex when you're dealing with references, and I just could not wrap my head around the inbound, outbound, and this one was like a nested inbound, outbound query I had to do, but it made sense once I had some help with it. But yeah, it's totally a powerful thing you can use for just beyond JSM, because most of my projects typically are on the software side, and then I started playing with this for a JSM usage. My current clients, mostly JSM, I saw a lot of potential for how you can use it for software as well.
Thanks for the example.
That's awesome. I have a few questions, but I mean, I think they're relatively simple. I could probably look them up, but maybe while I got everybody on the call, maybe you could show me. Naturally, you can use Insight to store, it's inventory management in a sense. Can we attribute, say, certain devices to certain users and have it display on the user account? I mean, you more or less show that off, Kathy, right? When you were a user, you were submitting an issue and you say this relates to which machine, right? How do you define that in the system? Can you demonstrate that, or can someone demonstrate that?
Yeah, you just use that user attribute. So do I still have, oh no. You've
Let me
got
see
share.
if I can
Yeah.
make you back into share. Why is
Thank you
it
so
that it
much.
only allows me make host? Yeah, I'll just make you host again, because I don't see why I can't make you a presenter.
All right. I'm still getting disabled there.
Looks like you made Dean the.
Oh, I did.
Host.
Let me reclaim.
Have the power.
Yes.
Not anymore.
Because things were like jumping around there. I think I got you this time.
Oh, yeah, I saw a little. There we go. All right, let me move my Zoom controls. So these are a bunch of my assets, and then some of them are associated with people. So here you can see an owner. So it's just they're an attribute.
I see.
So this is my laptop. These are all different attributes. And then, well, actually, I guess mine's a couple hops. So I actually have that people object. You could certainly just put it with a actual user. So these are the different types that you can put in there. So they could be the Jira users, they could be Jira groups. In my case, I actually point at people, which that's where we were talking about. I have my people.
This is very interesting to me. So this is what I was talking about before, right? And what I guess you're showcasing to me. Yeah.
So this actually leads me to the question that I had about this is, are you considering putting this as like a live demo public that would like could be in read-only mode? You know, out on the internet.
Oh, the demo kit?
Yeah. So, you know what I mean? Like that way people could click around and explore. Maybe it.
So yeah, like have you seen the automation playground?
I have not, no.
So we want to get to that. So we have this thing called the automation playground, which allows you to see a bunch of sample rules, and like you can click and look at things. So it'd be great if we kind of did the same for Insight, right? I think that's what your ask is.
Yeah, that's what the ask is.
Yes. So I got it on the recording now. I will certainly share that with the product marketing team.
Oh, another good use case for Insight is I use it for when I want to pare down. Sometimes the rules, you have like 3 options for your rule scope. You got single project, multiple project, or global. And sometimes you want something in between multiple and global where you don't want to have to manually define. Like I had 14 projects. I'm like, that's just painful to look at. So I again use the project object. And then I have I have a set of shared rules where they're set to global, but the first thing they do is they'll do an object lookup and say, is this flag true in Insight? If not, exit the rule. If it is true, then great, go through and run the rules. So you can use Insight as like a additional gate to do all kinds of extra stuff. You can use, some if logic against it, where you're also saying, all right, when I have, these maybe the subset of options, like example I had was I had a set of users that wanted it where whenever they referenced another issue that they wanted that the comment to be copied to that other issue. But I didn't want that to be something that was turned on for everybody. So I set it as a global rule, but only applied when to those two projects or something. So things like that, where Insight also helps play just that continued control as an admin, more flexibility.
Any easy way, may I ask, is there any easy way to translate the users, or at least the group of users, into objects as people, for example? Or was it all just made by hand, right? You made a people object type and then added the people and then manually linked.
There's an automation that pulls through. So it's not like an out of the box automation, but one of the guys made a rule that pulls through the users and groups and creates that schema.
That's
Are they using the webhook?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to get a copy of something like that, because that's part of what I'm struggling with, and how I would populate like a customer's object.
me too.
Let me
This is
see
it.
if I can track it down. And if I can, I'll share it with you, Mark, with the PowerPoint too, and all the links.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. There's just a lot of areas where I could imagine if I had a lot more skill with APIs, at the Jira APIs, I could do such a lot of damage with the webhook action.
Something I didn't mention also with Insight, showing it in relation to being on issues. Insight can also, you can have automation against changes in Insight, which means tech refreshes. Hey, these contracts are coming up in the next 3 months, so raise requests with purchasing to deal with that. Or actually, I have for facilities, right? I do a monthly walkthrough of the rooms and make sure all the equipment's there. So it creates those requests and lists all the things they're supposed to find in that particular room as like a checklist for them. So just the fact that it can be driven from the insight and the data there, not just from initiated from issues themselves.
I could also see that for if you want to have a little bit more control over if somebody's added an object into Insight and you want to have an approval, you give it a status of a pending approval, and then you can have a ticket that signifies that approval, and then it updates the object. Kind of like what you were saying for the how I could go about updating, creating the project.
Yeah, that's true. You could do it on the back end too.
Yeah.
Are there ways to restrict someone from being assigned to a, let's say, a device object when someone else owns that device or is associated to that device? Let's say, for example, you have a laptop, right? Somebody technically is already using that laptop, but someone tries to allocate the laptop to a different user. Is there any kind of thing that would pop up and say, hey, no, this is already allocated to another user, you can't do that? Or am I asking a dumb question and it's going to be fairly obvious when they see the other?
So yeah, I mean, so if they're doing it straight in Insight, there should be a user already there. Right. And you can decide whether it only allows one value, or it could be multiple or two. You can actually be really specific on the cardinality of that object. So if they were in Insight, they would see that person. I do address your use case though, where I'm trying to remember exactly what the request type is, but similar to yours, it was hey, I'm going to give this thing to somebody else. It goes and uses automation. It was no, that belongs to so-and-so. Right. So did they approve it? It actually has an approval that goes to that owner, because, approvals can be done by help seekers, not necessarily licensed JSM users, right? They don't have to have those licenses to just sign off yeah, they can take my laptop. So I kind of solved for it on the help seeker portal.
I see.
I think that's also the fun and the challenge with Insight, but I guess that's also just inherent with Jira, right? There's just so many ways to go about things. So.
I do have one other question, but it's more general. It's not so much insight. It was just kind of something I noticed in the presentation. I actually rambled about it before. Feel free to answer if you can. Kathy, I saw that you had an escalate button from your service desk portal. I'm being asked right now by my team to implement an escalate button, and I'm trying to determine what that exactly means, right? And how that looks. And I'm curious, how you and your team use it, and ultimately how you determined it looks, right? What that actually means for your team.
You mean like the major incident button, or which?
I saw from the portal view, right? If you're looking at an issue, the customer has the option on the right-hand side.
Oh, I did. Yes.
Made you host again.
Okay.
Sorry.
Try and find it.
No, it's all good.
Let me just find it.
From the looks of it, from my side, it looks like it's a transition.
Yeah. Now I gotta find. Do you remember where it was?
I'm sure it's one of the issues that you've already created. So maybe like from one of the requests that you've already made, but it is from the portal view. I'll say that much.
I knew I had a request type that was like escalate, but from here, so I don't know if you all are using the new kind of powered up view. So a lot of the Opsgenie features, so I guess it depends on what version you're on. Premium and above includes Opsgenie, which means that now you've got like the ability to create Slack channels directly from an incident, so you can start to swarm around particular issues, right? So that now, sorry, I was like, oh, I just got slacked, but that was me. So you would start to get kind of, the Slack messages and see all of that in your different channels. You can start a call, so that's like a video conference. But what I've got in mind, if I trigger a major incident, it bumps up the priority, so it should go to highest. And then there's some workflow behind the scenes that will make sure we get out to the different responders. So I think the example you saw actually takes that into account. I don't know if y'all are using the on-call schedules. Again, this comes included with Premium above. This is a feature of Opsgenie.
Wow.
So, being able to trigger which responders come through based on, so you can see, I use Alana for everything. So she's in all of these different teams, but it, will start to trigger, like in this case, if something went to the network support team, Cassie would get paged out based on her preferences. So whether that's a page or a phone call, or if she's got the app, it'll pop up. But essentially the escalation is tied to this. So we go back to that incident, or just grab an incident. You can see here's the responders. So that actually went out. You can see what the responder alert looks like. Again, all powered by Opsgenie. So it went out to that platform support team. And then you'll start to see like, hey, this was sent to Mitch. And then I've got kind of all the escalations, like if so-and-so doesn't respond within X amount, then go to the next person, or then go to the manager, like all of that defined. So that's where our escalations kind of come through.
What about what I was talking about was probably a lot simpler. Forgive me. There's a button right on the portal that says escalate. It says escalate.
Oh, yeah.
So was next to it.
Yeah, I think that's a customer transition.
Simple as that, right? Customer.
Oh, I'm with you now. That's standard. That's like,
I love that you showed me that though. I'm excited for Opsgenie now, and I can't wait to set up the schedules and more. Right? This is definitely another presentation.
Yeah, Atlassian went bananas over the last like year and a half, 2 years on acquisitions. I mean, Opsgenie, the Performa Insight, missing like one or two other big ones. They're totally taking on like
Correct.
ServiceNow head on the service management front.
just curious, like what this means for your team, right? Because I'm trying to determine what the escalation workflow looks for at our workplace. And I wasn't even so much going to make a transition. I was actually just going to make a field, make a ticket as an escalate, and it would show differently in the queues. But I don't know, right? I mean, this seems a lot more.
This is out of the
visual.
box, so you wouldn't have to do anything. So I definitely recommend sticking it out of the box where you can.
Thank you. Okay, no, we'll do that. I'll stick with out of the box. What
And
happens?
then yeah, you would trigger your queues on that,
So
right?
that's
So
just
it's moved
changing
over
that
to that.
status. Is that, what is that
Mhm.
actually? Okay.
Yep. So in the workflow, they have an escalated option.
Okay, so in the end, this is simply a transition to an escalated status.
Correct.
When you say it's out of the
But
box,
the fact,
template, it's a template included.
correct. Yeah. And it's surfaced up in the portal for that.
Uh-huh.
But like even in your case, like if you wanted to use that and for some reason you don't like that status, right? Like you could always transition it back to whatever it was. And then your trigger is just looking for any that were in that status, right? It doesn't have to stay in that escalated status. But keep in mind, this also can start to trigger stuff on the SLA, right? Like,
I understand what you mean. You know, the way we were thinking about things, this moves away big time from the insight discussion, so forgive me. But what I was thinking was you have this workflow, right? And I noticed you even have a canceled status, right? As well as, you know, closed, resolved, etc. I'm basically trying to get it to the point where, and correct me if you guys don't think it's a good idea, right? But we have basically one open status and one closed status, and then we have various in progress statuses. And I try to limit the amount of statuses, all right? And basically what I was going to do is I was going to have fields, like even just tick box fields that represent escalate or something like that. And I was going to cancel issues based off resolutions instead, right? Resolve the issue and then set the resolution as canceled, and then kind of query based off resolution instead of status. I don't know what the consequences of that are. I don't know if there's any drawbacks or if it makes sense to do that. But basically, I'm trying to limit the amount of statuses out in the wild and just kind of default more towards resolution.
why?
Anytime-
Because too many people have created statuses,
Eh,
or
I don't know. I just kind of want to use the resolution field. I want to use the resolution field how I would expect it to be used, right? I even made a field, right, for like for tickets that have been reopened, right? Rather than having like a, how do I say this, like a separate status. Some managers of mine in the past want, instead of an open status, they want a reopened status, right? And instead what I do is I set a transition that leads the ticket back to open. And then I have a field in the background, right? Just a little checkbox field that says, when this transition goes through, check this field to signify that the ticket was once upon a time reopened, right? And then I can run metrics for the amount of tickets that were reopened, whether it was once or twice or whatever. But I guess it's all a matter of preference, right? Like whether you want a status or whether you want fields to run.
it is. Yeah, I think it's also like, I know it was hard to get time in status before. And so I think people did like, you know, these workarounds or that with the new additions, like you can now get that information. And certainly with the analytics that's coming out. So I don't know if you all knew that, but we acquired Chartio a year ago as well. So Atlassian Analytics is coming. Yeah, so it's currently in EAP. And I think the first like release is coming soon. And then I'm excited that Insight, see, we'll get back around to Insight, that's the topic. Analytics will be able to work with Insight, I think towards the end of the year, kind of end of like fall area. So I don't know if you're trying to solve it because of the reporting side or not, but I think the advantage of using the statuses would be that the end users can do that, because, you know, end users can't update fields, right? Like once they've logged something, they can't then do something. You'd have to like scrape their comments. That just feels a little more hacky than having the out of the box escalate button.
I like what you said about time and status though. I neglected that this is, this calculated field, right? This exists as well. I won't be able to run those kind of, I won't be able to get that information. I won't be able to get that time information with just, checking a field, right? And then ultimately relaying which ones meet the criteria. So that, I think, is drawbacks right there.
Especially like to help identify those bottlenecks, right? Like, why did it sit at this status waiting for this, approval, and then it got escalated and we got blamed, like, I don't know. I've found those time and status like to help from that perspective, right? To shed light on the other teams that we work with and how we all are kind of, need to work together to get that overall SLA sorted. So.
Hey, thank you so much for your insight. And we're coming to that decision right now. I'm like, all right, do I make a resolution to signify an issue's canceled and just continue to keep it sent to the result status? Or do I make a separate canceled status and, set up transitions from elsewhere in the workflow or from all, right, to be made to go to cancel, et cetera. And I just wanted to know what the pros and drawbacks of that were. And especially if I was ultimately moving away from that resolution. But in the end, I can still set a resolution for canceled on a status for canceled, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I can automatically.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah, I've actually shared your mindset, Dean, on the in terms of the done statuses. I've never felt the need for why I need to have like 3 or 4 different types of completed statuses. I typically have like one like done, and then you put the resolution. The reopen thing, I did run into a situation where they wanted to have like reopened, and they wanted like some controls over who can reopen it, and I thought, okay, that is best to be done as a status, and then I created a condition to help with the control, and then but I never kept it in that reopen status meant nothing for the most part, so I had an automation will just simply move it, just plug in reopen for like a second, then it moves back to whatever state they wanted in. Gotcha. And then for no other purpose, but for them to be able to run the report and say was reopened, status was reopened, they can see any of the tickets that went through that reopen transition.
I see. Thank you so much for your information.
In another discussion, maybe this is a dumb idea, but you can use the transition count too, possibly, because how many times would it go through open more than once? I've done stuff like that before. I don't know. One thing that
we saw your face for a second. I thought that was what his O was for. Like, oh, you're.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm a villain. Let me.
I saw his like laptop light like flash in his face twice during this call.
Yeah,
it's funny.
Well, with Dale's comment.
When people rewatch this video, they're gonna see me slowly fade out, right?
Yeah. Let me see what I can do here. You mentioned that there's going to be another meeting on Insight the week after Summit. Is that what you said?
So, yeah, the teams will to the live in-person one is in 2 weeks, and then the week after they'll have a bunch of other sessions. I'm pretty sure there are some Insight ones. Mine got moved to in-person, and then somebody else is filling in for me because I'm not going to Vegas, but I know there are other Insight ones, and I thought the idea was that they were going to rebroadcast those live ones the following week. So, and if not, then I'm sure they'll be available shortly after.
Okay, thank you.
Dean is upgraded to a silhouette.
Oh my God. It's funny, it's very bright over here. The camera is just not picking it up. I'm telling you. I swear, I'm not a vampire. Forgive me.
I want to be respectful of Kathy's time because I know it's like approaching 11 o'clock her time. But do either of you have any other questions for Kathy or?
Kathy, is there any way we can reach out to you? And I promise I won't flood you, but just maybe I don't know, just maybe first like some very basic questions. I know we have an Atlassian community here with our group, and naturally I'll message the group for any kind of tidbits, but I don't know, maybe if I'm really stuck with something, and I promise I won't come to you with anything Atlassian customer support related or anything like that. It's more creative ideas, particularly with insight. Like I'm definitely going to do what you did regarding the people categories, right? I love how you did people, team, department. I'm going to set all that stuff up. I'm going to use certain attributes. So would love to pick your brain for whatever you found useful, because I already have some ideas of my own, but naturally, if you have something that you think I should look into and you think I would really benefit from and get creative with, I'd love that. And I don't know, I can't, that's, you really did open my eyes to this. I've had this on my mind for years, and now I see how it's possible finally.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we're always looking for people to collaborate with and help along. I think I need to join your guys' community, so I will try and maybe Mark will invite me. I actually just did my first answer on community on Insight earlier today, so I should probably be a bit more active there. And then, yeah, I'll follow up with I know somebody made a simple rule to pull in those users and groups, so I'm happy to, if I can track it down, share that with y'all, so to get you started too.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't, even though we're down to like a couple of us, there was an announcement today that our Atlassian team member that oversees like the US community, she's stepping away from Atlassian. So we're gonna have somebody new. One of the things that I had as a pending request is actually setting up a LA group. Like if you look at the Atlassian on community.atlassian.com, there's no like LA group. Just so you know, Kathy, the LA area was like dormant for like 4 years. And then my manager's like, hey, you know, the Atlassian's been looking for somebody to run the LA community. You should think about it. Okay, next thing you know, I'm in it. So yeah, so there hopefully there's going to be some more stuff coming, and I need to, one of the other things I need to do is get better at promoting us, because I do like the intimate setting, but I'd also love to see us get bigger groups here as well. For, you know, given the size of the LA community, I think we have like 500 members. So it'd be good to be able to start getting that outreach going and building that up. So that's one of my goals. And then,
and we've got a lot, you know, on my team, like we're growing. There's actually my manager's on the West Coast, and then one of my colleagues is on the West Coast as well. So there's, you know, our team is growing, and we support a lot of reps on the West Coast. So you certainly would get active participation from us. You know, we want to help you all. And of course, I love Insight, so I'm always happy to hear how people are using it and brainstorming ideas and that. So
I'll say
definitely keep me involved.
That's like half the reason I'm involved on the community and the Q&A is just seeing the kind of problems that people are coming up with. I love one helping, but also, ooh, that's what they're trying to solve. I could probably do something like that.
I think also, like I mentioned before, there's so many ways to do things, right? Like Mark, even when we met and we were talking through ideas, right? We were solving similar use cases, but we were doing it slightly different ways. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like that was just really good to see, right? Because, you know, Dean, like in your case, right? Let's figure out what are the pros and cons, and there's no like right way. It really just depends on your use case, and being able to talk through it and see how other people are doing it, like is really, really helpful. So I definitely have been impressed with the community posts and people, what they're trying to do. And I'm still being recorded, aren't I? I tend to go to the community site more than our documentation. So that is something that we are also trying to work on. I think the partners and, you know, folks like Mark, like being able to answer, they're just quicker and they provide more context, right? Like our documentation can be very, click this button and then do this. And you're like, but why? So I love that the community gets involved in that side. And of course, like these kinds of sessions where we can explore that. So.
I've been in the LA community now for something like, oh my goodness, I want to say it's been 8 years. And Mark, seriously, once upon a time we were meeting in Santa Monica, and it was pretty active. It was very active. We had something like 30 plus users, and usually there would be 2 presentations per session, and we'd have a catered dinner. It was really wonderful. So I don't know, the more we get out of COVID, maybe we can bring that back. And I think you'll see the community's more alive than you'd expect. That I will say, this has so far been the most informative session I've been in to date. I've really learned a lot, like a whole lot. And even some of my questions that were outside the scope of insight, I'm really glad you addressed them, Kathy. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, happy to help. And we got that on the recording, right?
Okay, and Mark as well. Thank you for leading this community back up. Seriously, because without you taking stepping up, I don't know if I would have been here. It's nice.
Thank you. It's the community I'm passionate about. I've always loved primarily Jira over the years, and I remember setting it up like it was like 2009, 2008. Or somebody came at me and said, "I'm thinking of going agile, and we have this tool." Okay, and they said, "Set it up for us," and that was basically it for me getting familiar with it. And yeah, so when this opportunity came out, I was like, "Yeah, cool." I think our big thing though is continuing to find. I'm so happy that I've been tapping the well here to get people like Kathy for some of these sessions, so we can have like hearing straight from Atlassian. Especially with some of these tools that Atlassian's absorbing and getting the people that are behind.
Yeah, we're moving fast. So
yeah. So yeah, I've got another one coming down the pipe. I'm trying to get set up if Erica can do that before she heads out. Otherwise, I'll have to hit up our next one. But there's another new tool that Jira just released. It's like primarily tied for product managers, product owners. It's like I'm trying to remember what exactly it's called, but it's basically like all your refinement process and all those things you're doing to get from an idea into a backlog. And it's getting ready to hit beta, actually already in beta, and something that I thought would be useful for some of the people that are more on the product management side of the house. That's another thing I'm hoping to get out of these community events, is that we're really hitting the gambit, like bringing out our tech guys saying, "Yeah, I want to know more about Bitbucket," or "I want to know more about Confluence," things like that. So hopefully we'll be hopping around all these different cool topics.
Mark,
yeah, and you guys are in the right spot, right? Like everybody's out in California, so
yeah,
certainly.
I'm actually
in
Wisconsin, so.
Oh, sorry for lumping you in.
Hey, Mark, a good idea for the next one might be to look into Atlassian Assist. I know that Halp has changed.
Yes.
You have the Assist breakout. I'm definitely curious to see how that works. And now, especially after getting exposure through Kathy with Ops Genie and how that built out that Slack channel to escalate the major incident, that's interesting, right? I want to see where Assist comes in handy, especially once you have that tool built in already from the enterprise side.
Yeah,
that's actually in beta right now, so you can go sign up to get it turned on if you're already in JSM Cloud. So it'll be available for any paid subscription, so even standard, which is basically allows you to tie it to a request type, and then they can raise tickets through Slack or Teams.
That rocks. Okay, I'll try it out.
Yeah, if you Google the community for Assist, you should see the beta program, and then there's a little form that you can sign on, and they'll switch it on for you.
Okay, pretty cool. That's it for me. It's very good.
I'm signing off.
Thank
you very much, Kathy.
Yes,
nice meeting you all.
Nice meeting you.
All right,
Yeah,
take care.
Likewise. Thank you very much.
All right,
all right,
bye.
bye all.